Sunny Meadows Farm looked peaceful. Oh boy, was that an illusion. The sun always shone brightly there. The grass was green. Too green, maybe, like someone spilled paint. The cows mooed happily, or so it seemed. They probably knew something. The pigs oinked with a certain knowing grunt. This farm had secrets. Big, noisy, explosive secrets. It was a lovely place if you ignored the faint smell of gunpowder and the occasional glint of metal hidden in the hay. The farmhouse was old. It had peeling paint, a classic look. A porch swing creaked in the breeze. Very normal, except for the extra thick steel shutters on the windows and the reinforced door. Farmer Jed lived there. He was the head honcho. He looked like a regular farmer. Overalls, straw hat, a piece of wheat in his mouth. But his eyes, oh, his eyes held a spark. A spark that said, "Don't mess with my chickens or my goats." Or my prize-winning pumpkin, for that matter. 4 other farmers shared this peculiar paradise. Farmer Betty, sweet as pie until you saw her polishing something big. Farmer Gus, quiet and strong, usually whittling wood or sharpening something long and shiny. Farmer Daisy, always humming, often near the flower beds, which sometimes hid landmines. Just small ones, she'd say. And Farmer Slim, tall and lanky, who could fix any tractor. And apparently build some very interesting farm implements. These weren't your grandma's farmers unless your grandma was a secret agent. Life on Sunny Meadows was a routine. Wake up early, feed the animals, tend the crops, check the perimeter defenses. You know, normal farm stuff. The animals seemed to understand. The chickens strutted with purpose. The goats practiced their headbutts on old tires. Even the scarecrow looked a bit too menacing. It wore an old army helmet. This place was ready. Ready for what? Nobody asked. They just knew. Something was always coming for Sunny Meadows. Today it would be something with lots of teeth. Farmer Jed, the leader of this brave bunch, loved his machete. It was not just any machete, this one was shiny. It was sharp. It had a custom grip made from old tractor tire. He called her Betsy. Betsy had seen some action, mostly against overgrown weeds, sure. But Jed practiced his swings daily. He had a special scarecrow for that. A scarecrow filled with tough old newspapers. He'd sliced it clean in half. "Hi-ya!" he'd shout. The chickens would cluck in approval. Or maybe they were just hungry. Then there was Farmer Betty. She was a sweet lady, always baking cookies, apple pies too. But her favorite thing to bake? Trouble for intruders. She had a missile launcher, a big one, bright pink with little flower stickers. She called it Petunia. Petunia was usually hidden in the pantry, right next to the jam jars. Betty could heft Petunia onto her shoulder with surprising ease. "This will teach him to mess with my award-winning roses," she'd mutter. Her aim was surprisingly good for a baker. Farmer Gus was a man of few words. He preferred to let his actions speak, and his actions usually involved 2 machetes. Not 1, but 2. He called them slice and dice. He moved like a whirlwind, a very focused, denim-clad whirlwind. He could peel an apple with them, or, defend the turnip patch. He kept them incredibly sharp. You could see your reflection in them, a slightly worried reflection usually. He was the quiet storm of the group, always ready. And Farmer Daisy? Don't let her cheerful humming fool you. She chose a missile launcher too. Smaller than Betty's, but just as potent. Hers was a sunshine yellow. She named it Buttercup. She said it matched her favorite sunflowers. Daisy believed in coordinated aesthetics, even in weaponry. Farmer Slim, the lanky genius, had a machete. But his was special. It was 10 feet long when fully extended. Telescopic, he called it. For reaching the high branches, he'd say with a wink. Or the high alligators. The chickens of Sunny Meadows were not ordinary birds. Oh no, these were feathered commandos. They pecked at corn, sure, but they also pecked at training dummies. Each chicken wore a tiny camouflage bandana. Red for the rooster, their fearless leader, Cluck Norris. They were armed with miniature pellet guns, specially designed by Farmer Slim, firing hardened corn kernels. Not deadly, perhaps, but very, very annoying if you're an alligator. They clucked in formation. It was quite a sight. The goats were just as prepared. They were the heavy support unit. Each goat, from Billy the Gruff to Nanny McPhee, wore a custom-fitted helmet. These helmets had little horns, just for show. Their real weapons were strapped to their backs. Small, goat-sized rocket launchers, firing modified fireworks. Loud bangs and bright sparks. Farmer Slim had been busy in his workshop. The goats looked serious. They practiced their battle bleats. It sounded like a very angry choir. They were ready for anything, or so they thought. Camouflage was key for this animal army. The chickens blended into the haystacks. Their bandanas matched the dried grass. The goats, painted with mud and leaf patterns, looked like lumpy bushes, moving, bleeding bushes. They had secret tunnels under the barn. They had lookout posts in the old oak tree. They communicated with a series of complex clucks and baas. It was a sophisticated operation. General Patton would have been proud, or very confused, probably both. Their training was rigorous. Early morning drills, obstacle courses made of old tires and barrels, target practice on unlucky tin cans. Cluck Norris would strut and inspect his troops. Billy the Gruff would demonstrate the proper rocket launching stance. It was a serious business protecting the farm. They took their duties very seriously, more seriously than some humans took their jobs. These animals were professionals, pint-sized, furry, feathery professionals. They were the farm's first and weirdest line of defense. The day started like any other. Sun shining, birds singing, farmers farming, animals arming, then a ripple in the swamp. A big ripple. Farmer Jed paused, mid-hoe. He squinted his eyes. The swamp was at the edge of their property. Usually it just burped up frogs, or the occasional lost tourist. But this was different. A low growl echoed across the fields, a hungry growl. A growl that said, "I haven't had breakfast, and that chicken looks tasty. Oh dear." Suddenly the reeds parted. Not one, not two, but a horde of alligators. Big ones, small ones, medium-sized ones with mean eyes. They slithered out, jaws snapping. Their tails swished back and forth, like scaly green metronomes of doom. They moved with surprising speed, straight towards the barn, straight towards the delicious, plump livestock, and the not-so-delicious, but heavily armed farmers. The alligators looked determined. They probably skipped their morning coffee. "Big mistake! Gators!" yelled Farmer Jed. That was the signal, the battle cry, the "oh no, not again" moment. Farmer Betty dropped her watering can. Farmer Gus stopped whittling. Farmer Daisy paused her humming. Farmer Slim nearly dropped his extra-long machete. The air crackled with tension. Or maybe that was just Slim's experimental electric fence. The farmers grabbed their weapons, their faces grim. Well, mostly grim. Betty still had a bit of flour on her nose. It slightly ruined the dramatic effect. The animal brigade sprang into action. Cluck Norris let out a mighty cock-a-doodle doom. Chickens emerged from haystacks, pellet guns ready. Goats scrambled from behind barrels, rocket launchers aimed, they took their positions. A feathered wall of defiance, a furry barricade of bravery. The alligators paused. They looked confused. Chickens with guns, goats with rockets. This wasn't in the swamp brochure, but they were hungry. And probably not very smart. They charged forward with renewed, toothy vigor. Section 5, Close Combat Chaos, Blades and Beaks. Farmer Jed was first into the fray. "Betsy, old girl, let's dance!" he roared. He swung his trusty machete. An alligator yelped, or maybe it was a gurgle. It's hard to tell with alligators. Jed moved with the grace of a much younger man who fought reptiles for a living. He parried a snout snap. He sidestepped a tail whip. He was a whirlwind of denim and determination. Another gator lunged. Jed responded with a well-aimed bonk on the head with the flat of his blade. Bad gator! Farmer Gus, silent as ever, flanked the scaly invaders. Slice and dice became blurs of silver. He moved like a ninja, a farming ninja. He spun, he leaped, he twirled. Alligators snapped at empty air. Gus was too fast, too smooth. He wasn't aiming to hurt them badly, just to confuse them, and maybe give them a few superficial nicks, enough to make them reconsider their career choices. One particularly bold alligator tried to bite his boot. Gus just hopped onto its back and rode it for a few seconds. Yeehaw! Meanwhile, Cluck Norris and his chicken commandos provided crucial support. "Fire at will, ladies," he clucked. A volley of hardened corn kernels rained down. The alligators blinked. They shook their heads. It was like being attacked by very aggressive popcorn. Some kernels bounced off their tough hides. Others found sensitive spots, noses, eyes, the inside of their ears. Ouch! In alligator language, probably. The chickens reloaded, their tiny bandanas flapping heroically in the breeze. They were small, but mighty. The goats, under Billy the Gruff's command, aimed their mini rockets. "Ready! Aim! Bah! Fire!" he bleated. Small rockets shot out with whooshes and bangs. They weren't powerful enough to cause real damage, but they made a lot of noise. And smoke. And bright, confusing sparks. One rocket hit an alligator right on the rump. It yelped and jumped 3 feet in the air. Then it ran around in circles. The goats bleated with satisfaction. This was better than headbutting tires any day. The chaos was magnificent. Section 6, boom goes the farm, missile madness. Farmer Betty surveyed the scene. Machetes were flying, chickens were popping, goats were booming. Time for Petunia to sing her song, she declared. She hoisted the big pink missile launcher onto her shoulder. It looked comical, until she aimed it. She took a deep breath. She squeezed the trigger. A missile, trailing pink smoke, soared through the air. It hit a cluster of particularly grumpy-looking alligators. Alligators went flying, not too high, just enough to make them dizzy, and reconsider their lunch plans. Farmer Daisy, not to be outdone, armed Buttercup. Her yellow missile launcher gleamed in the sun. "Eat sunshine, you scaly scallywags," she chirped. Another missile, this one trailing yellow smoke. It exploded near the swamp's edge. It created a large muddy splash, and a wave that pushed a few hesitant gators back into the water. "Direct hit," she giggled. The explosions were impressive. Luckily, they mostly hit empty ground. Or very unlucky alligators. The barn was still standing, mostly. The alligators were now thoroughly confused, and a little bit singed. They had expected an easy meal. Fluffy chickens, tender goats, maybe a slow-moving farmer. They had not expected Rambo chickens, rocket-powered goats, and farmers with machetes and missile launchers. This was not what they signed up for. Some started to retreat, back towards the relative safety of the swamp. They'd stick to fish from now on, and maybe therapy. This farm was too much trouble. Farmer Slim watched the chaos with his 10-foot telescopic machete. He hadn't needed to use it much, except to gently nudge a few retreating alligators. "Go on now, git," he'd say, poking them from a safe distance. The battle was turning. The farmers and their animal army were winning, they cheered. The chickens clucked triumphantly. The goats let out victorious bleats. Sunny Meadows Farm was safe once more, or so they thought. The universe, it seemed, had other plans, and better transportation. Section 7, Interruption from Above, UFOs Uninvited. Just as Farmer Jed was about to declare victory, the sky changed. It went from sunny blue to a weird, pulsating green. Uh-oh. That was never a good sign. Everyone looked up. Farmers, chickens, goats, even the remaining very bewildered alligators. A hush fell over the farm. The only sound was the crackling of a small fire where a missile had landed, and Farmer Betty muttering about needing more sugar for her next batch of cookies. This was not normal weather, not even for Sunny Meadows. Then they appeared, 3 of them. Big silver discs, UFOs. They hovered silently above the battlefield. No engine noise, no flashing lights at first. Just there. Menacingly round, like giant dinner plates for a cosmic giant. Farmer Gus lowered slice and dice. Farmer Slim retracted his long machete with a cluck. Norris froze mid-strut. The goats stopped bleeding. Even the alligators seemed to forget they were supposed to be scary. They just stared upwards, jaws agape. This was new, very new. A low hum started to emanate from the UFOs. It vibrated in their chests. It made their teeth tingle. Then, lights, bright, colorful, flashing lights, like a disco party in the sky. Red, blue, green, yellow, pulsating in rhythm with the hum. It was mesmerizing, and a little bit terrifying. "Well, I'll be," muttered Farmer Jed, adjusting his straw hat. "Never seen one of them up close before." Farmer Betty wondered if they had good recipes up there. Aliens must eat something, right? Suddenly, from the largest UFO, a beam of light shot down. A wide, conical beam. It wasn't a scary, destructive laser beam. It was more like a giant, ethereal vacuum cleaner hose. It pulsed gently. It landed right in the middle of the farmyard, encircling a random assortment of combatants. A farmer here, a chicken there. An alligator looking very confused. The beam was soft. It didn't hurt, it just was. And it was clearly about to do something abduction-y. Section 8, beam me up, Scotty, and everyone else. The beam activated with a gentle. Farmer Jed was mid-sentence saying, "Now hold on a minute, you space fellas," when his feet lifted off the ground. He floated upwards, still gesticulating. Betsy the machete clattered to the earth. "Hey, my machete!" he yelled, but his voice was muffled by the beam. He rose smoothly, like an unwilling elevator passenger. Next, Cluck Norris, who was trying to rally his chickens for an anti-aircraft formation, was scooped up, his tiny bandana fluttering. He let out a defiant yet airborne cluck. Farmer Betty, Petunia the missile launcher still on her shoulder, was next. "Oh my stars," she exclaimed as she ascended. She hoped they had tea, and that Petunia wouldn't accidentally go off inside the spaceship. That would be embarrassing. Farmer Gus, ever stoic, simply folded his arms as he was lifted. Slice and Dice, however, he held on to tightly. One never knew when one might need two good machetes, even in space. Farmer Daisy floated up, humming a slightly nervous tune. Buttercup, her yellow launcher, dangled from her grip. The animal brigade was not spared. Goats, mid-bleat, rose into the sky, their little rocket launchers still strapped on. They looked like confused, furry angels of minor destruction. Chickens, pellet guns dropping, were sucked up in a feathered flurry. Even the alligators. Yes, the alligators. One particularly large gator was halfway through a snap when it found itself airborne. Its jaw hung open in a comical expression of pure, reptilian disbelief. The beam was very efficient. No one was left behind, not even the slightly singed ones. Inside the lead UFO, it was surprisingly spacious and clean, very clean, almost sterile, except for the flashing disco ball hanging from the ceiling and the faint sound of funky space music. Small, green aliens with big, curious eyes watched their new arrivals float in. The aliens looked a bit like skinny frogs in silver jumpsuits. They chittered to each other, pointing at the farmers, the animals, and especially the alligators. They seemed less like conquerors and more like very excited party planners who had just received a very diverse guest list. Section 9, Jupiter Jive, an intergalactic fiesta. The UFOs didn't waste any time. With a silent, they zipped away from Earth, faster than a speeding bullet, faster than Farmer Jed could complain about his lost machete. They zoomed past Mars, too red apparently. They zipped by Saturn, too many rings, hard to park. Their destination? Jupiter, the biggest planet in the solar system, and apparently the best place for an intergalactic party. Who knew? The aliens certainly did. They seemed to be experts in cosmic celebrations. Upon arrival, the abductees were gently deposited into a massive domed structure on one of Jupiter's moons. Or maybe it was Jupiter itself. It was hard to tell with all the swirling gas giant scenery outside the dome windows. Inside it was party central. Anti-gravity dance floor? Check. Bubbling vats of weird, glowing, but tasty alien snacks? Check. A DJ with 6 arms spinning tunes from across the galaxy? Double check. The aliens handed out party hats, even to the alligators, who looked surprisingly dapper in them. At first, everyone was a bit hesitant. Farmers stared at aliens. Aliens stared at chickens with tiny discarded bandanas. Alligators just sort of lay there, looking overwhelmed. Then, Farmer Betty, ever the social butterfly, grabbed the nearest alien by its 3-fingered hand. "Well, come on then, dearie, let's boogie," she said. And boogie they did. Soon, Farmer Jed was trying to teach an alien the electric slide. Farmer Gus was arm wrestling a surprisingly strong, 4-armed alien. Daisy was discussing flower arrangements with a botanist alien. Slim was examining the UFO's engine schematics with an engineer alien. Even the animals joined in. Cluck Norris found a kindred spirit in a small, feathered alien, and they compared beak-sharpening techniques. The goats discovered that the anti-gravity dance floor was excellent for super high jumps. The alligators? Well, they found a pile of particularly delicious, squishy alien snacks and mostly just chilled out. Turns out they were pretty mellow once fed. The aliens, it transpired, were just lonely. They scanned the galaxy for interesting beings to invite to their annual Jupiter Jive. And Sunny Meadows Farm, with its armed farmers and Rambo animals, had definitely pinged their interesting radar. What an unexpected, delightful end to an invasion.